Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. So it is about 10:07 on a Tuesday. This is the last week of school. Going on break for Turkey Day. Thanksgiving, of course, is Thursday. Super excited. I am going to big tradition at my family or with my family is watching movies. Well, watching movies in general. Like whenever I go over to my folks, my mom and dad live pretty close to my to me, like about less than a mile away, and we both live in Northport. And but it's always been a thing of whenever I go over there for dinner or we get takeout or whatever, I always bring a bunch of movies. I always go to Opera House Video. It's a tradition we've had forever, as long as I can remember. Especially the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years. It's always been a tradition where I always go over and rent a bunch of movies at Opera House Video, and then we have like a meal, and then we watch them. And around the holidays, it's even a bigger thing. It's one of the reasons why I love movies so much. Is that's I was kind of raised that way. Like we would always do that, especially like on weekends. When I was a little kid, we would always, have a big meal on a Saturday or a Sunday, and then sometimes during the week, and we would sit around on the couch, and watch a bunch of movies. And I remember I got so many great memories as a kid doing that. It was always this thing, always like an event. And now it's like become a tradition where I go to Opera House Video, and especially around the holidays, which is a big movie watching period for me and my family. Um, so what I'll do today is I'm gonna rent a bunch of movies in preparation for Thanksgiving. Hopefully they have some new things. When I used to go to Opera House Video, I don't go there as often, and the only reason I don't go there as often is I've really dove took the deep dive into buying and collecting movies. So I started the last few years or so really buying a lot of movies, and have acquired a pretty cool collection that I'm pretty happy with. But so I always have constant things to watch when it comes to movies, which is I watch on average one movie a day at least, or at night, and on weekends typically Sunday or Saturday, but I'll watch more if I have the time, free or whatever. But I typically watch, movies all the time, so but when I go to Opera House Video, or at least when I used to, before I started getting so heavily into collecting and buying movies, I would buy, I would rent at Opera House Video. I'd rent like new releases, and then I would get, just like older films and movies that I might not have seen or blah blah blah. But now, since I buy a lot of movies, I typically just go there, um, well, to kind of stay current as to like new things that are coming out, new movies that I hear about, the occasional TV show, but usually it's always movies. And that's so now when I go to Opera House Video, I don't buy anything older, or I don't rent any older films. I typically just go for the new releases because, my brain and the way I operate, everything is kind of steeped in the kind of the old school way of filmmaking. 70s, 80s, 70s always being my favorite, and the 80s, and I've really gotten into the earlier decades over the years, and so. But with all of those things, I like to try to stay current and you know be surprised. I was in the beginning of this year, 2024, and as we're approaching the end of 2024, I was pretty bummed on the current state of affairs as far as films, and then also last year in 2023, there was a lot of movies that I saw and that were coming out that were just for me just not very interesting, and nothing really memorable. But then all of a sudden this year, as far as the horror genre, I've been kind of blown away by the amount of movies that have come out and some of the films that have come out that are just really great. And I think 2024, I did a show on this very topic probably about a month ago or less on my top, horror films for 2024. I don't usually do a top tier list of my favorite films of that year. That was kind of a first, and I think that show came out pretty good. But looking back, and it kind of it really snuck up on me, after being feeling kind of negative and bummed out as far as newer films and kind of the current state of affairs as far as around filmmaking. I was really surprised this year because there were some really good movies that came out this year, and there's still some films I'm really excited about. The one I'm anticipating the most is the new Robert Eggers film, the Nosferatu. Can't wait to see that. I'm super pumped to see that. I'm definitely going to go see that in the theater. And it's coming out on Christmas Day, which I think is just amazing. So, I think there's a cool tradition. There is like a cool tradition for me around horror films on Christmas, which is kind of really funny. I remember one year at my parents on Christmas Day. We had the big Christmas meal. We did our presents, but then later in the afternoon or at night, we watched The Exorcist on Christmas Day, and I just thought that was amazing. So, but this year has been really good. I've been really, really surprised. So, we'll see what there is to rent today. Fingers crossed. But today is a movie I've been really, really wanting to talk about. This movie I was completely blown away by, and just an amazing discovery. And it really goes. This film really goes to the core for me as to why I just love super low budget exploitation movies and movies that are just, well, B movies in general, but things that all the films and that make up the really low grade, trashy genre that I love, the world of exploitation and especially in the horror realm. But so it's just really funny. But I just finished. I just did another series, a franchise series, where I wanted to do do a series of shows on the entire, which was about 4 movies, or was 4 movies. I wanted to do a series of shows on the Superman movies, starring Christopher Reeve, and I just uploaded the the review for Superman 2. That was a tough, tough, tough movie to get through. I couldn't even get through it. One of the worst sequels I've ever seen in my life. Probably one of the worst movies. It's so bad and so pointless, so boring, and I don't know. It's one of those movies that I watch, and I almost feel bad for the actors in the film, because there's moments in that film that it's just so cringeworthy because it's so awkward, and clearly they had no direction as to what they were trying to do with this film. But I could not make it through that movie. It's painful. It's painful. So I had to break it up. I did 2 shows, a part 1 and a part 2, which is kind of ridiculous, and I've never done that before. But I did 2 shows on Superman Part 3. And I haven't uploaded the second part yet, but I will pretty soon, probably in the next couple days, if not today. But what an experience. So today's show is on Superman Part 4, The Quest for Peace. So I've said this in other videos, and this is going to be the last video on Superman, the franchise. And so, I've said before in other videos that in regards to Christopher Reeve, who is, for me, I do like Henry Cavill and I do like Man of Steel, but then I don't like it. I feel like it doesn't land the mark as far as what um in regards to say General Zod. It's Michael Shannon's a great actor, but I feel like they really did a disservice. His character is just not very strong. He's not very imposing. And but anyway, that's I have very mixed things about that film. There's things about it I do like, and I kind of want to watch it again, but we'll see. But anyway, and I do like Henry Cavill as Superman, but my favorite, the Zack Snyder cut of the Justice League is amazing. I love that film. I was so pissed off because I was craving to watch it, and for some reason wasn't able to find it, and I'm not sure why, because I have it here. That's a different story. But I do like Henry Cavill as Superman, especially in the Justice League, the director's cut, the Snyder cut, because the other cut is pretty much unwatchable. It's terrible. But the Snyder cut is really good, and the portrayal of Superman in that is really, really cool and very, very, one of the best versions. So Henry Cavill himself as Superman, I do like, but I'm kind of a Christopher Reeve guy. So anyway, this was the first time I did coverage of all of his films, and like I've said before, like I've seen the first two Superman movies. First one being Superman the movie that came out in '78, which kind of launched this whole thing. Saw that movie. I've seen both part one and part two, or Superman and Superman 2. I've seen those movies a bazillion times, so many times I can't even count. But the funny thing is, watching these movies in succession, I realized, and I was aware of it before, but watching Superman 3 and Superman 4, I realized, wow, I have I've barely seen any. I've barely watched these movies in the past. Like I think I might have seen Superman 3, maybe twice in my life, and Quest for Peace, the same thing, maybe even less. Um, yeah, it was. I remember when Superman 3 came out, and I remember seeing it, and it was just so so god awful that it just turned me off to the series, and I never stayed up on it. And then I think when Quest for Peace eventually came out, which kind of was the nail in the coffin for that franchise, I didn't even watch it, and I think I saw it years later, and I don't even remember if I liked it or not. I don't think I did, but so watching these movies in succession has been interesting. I love doing it, and it gives me a different perspective on the film. Whether it carries some weight or water, or it's just it becomes this dismissible experience. And that really was the case with Superman 3. But the other night, I watched Quest for Peace, and this movie it came out in 1987. Superman for the Quest for Peace. I have to say, this movie is, it might be my favorite in the franchise. As outrageous as that is to say, the thing about this movie is that Canon Films basically bought the rights to the Superman for this version. And Canon, if anybody out there, like I've covered quite a few Canon movies. Canon was a film company that was, they had a little span of time where they made a lot of money, but they basically specialized in making all of these like super uber low budget, kind of, well, the way I think of them is these like ninja action exploitation movies. They made, a series of all of these really low budget and terrible ninja films with Shokusugi. Michael Dudikoff, the American Ninja film series. They also did many films with Sho Kosugi and Michael Dudikoff, uh, various other action films that are so incredibly terrible, but they are so amazing. And Canon was a company that was, they had a little bit of, they had success for a while, but then it went bankrupt, and the whole organization was this incredibly corrupt, shit show. And the crazy thing is they acquired the rights for this fourth Superman, and their stuff is like, for the most part, compared to big studio films, Hollywood films, it's super low budget. And to me, it's like, it's basically, uh, you know, for me, it's like the world of exploitation. I mean, they're just like really, they're really low budget. They're really crappy. A lot of the acting is so shitty, and it's so over the top. It's totally weird. Some of their films are so incredibly strange. Um, but they're just so campy and ridiculous that I just love them. I can't get enough of them. So basically, what happened was when Canon was going into production with this film, they basically cut the budget literally in half from what they had in the previous films, and so this is like an incredible. This is like the most low grade, um, lowbrow piece of trash film ever made about Superman. It's kind of like, if you had your favorite exploitation director, or your sleaziest, most low budget, film company wanting to make a Superman movie, this would be it. I mean, this movie is the very different definition, where this thing is so utterly terrible in every conceivable way that I just found myself, because it goes there. I mean, it really goes there. And because it's so utterly ridiculous, and it's such a shit show, and it's such a train wreck, I was like, I could not help but fall in love with this movie. And I'm like, this movie is amazing because it's truly, and I believe in this saying, with all of my mortal being, it's so bad it's good. I think that is such, at its core for me, why I love trashy movies and, the world of exploitation, is that because of that. If it goes so deep into, the garbage can, and it's not taking itself that seriously, but if it goes all the way, not halfway, but if it goes all the way, 9 times out of 10, that movie is going to be one hell of a fun ride, as ridiculous as it is, because I think it, in its weird way, it commits to being um, a fully realized piece of shit. And this movie is like, it's staggering. It's awe inspiring in terms of like how bad it is. But at the same time, I'm watching this film, and again, I've only actually seen this movie maybe once, and I completely forgot it. And I had heard about how this film is so terrible that it's legendary, and that it's a Canon film, which I did not realize. Which, Canon is one of my favorite film companies, and um, I had heard, throughout the years, that this film was so, like, just one of the biggest train wrecks ever, conceived for the big screen, and that it was an experience because it's so bad. Not like bad like the live action version of Cats the musical, which is just painful and there's no redeeming quality. Um it's just painful to your mind and body. There is no redeeming quality. This film does have that quality of where it's so bad, but it's so entertaining. It's so fun. It's so utterly ridiculous. And I love that you can literally see the strings. You can literally see all of these complete and utter fuck ups from a technical perspective on this film. Whether Superman is flying, or there's and these battle scenes that are happening in Metropolis are just so incredibly ridiculous, and you can just see the production value like in the toilet bowl. But I think it totally works, and the cast for this film is just like unbelievable. Like the biggest being Mark Pillow as Nuclear Man. It's the return of Lex Luthor with Gene Hackman. Um, he breaks out of prison and creates this arch enemy from kryptonite or from the sun, and that is in the form of Mark Pillow as Nuclear Man. I mean, it's surreal, and I think this movie is one. It's one of the most enjoyable and fun rides I've had in some time. I have I only have this on DVD, but this will be a must-have on Blu-ray. Like, it's unbelievable. It's I had such a good time watching this film, and like again, like I said, I completely forgot this movie in every way. Um, the other thing that is just hilarious about this movie is that the filmmakers and a lot of the director for this movie, there's an amazing commentary track on this film where the filmmakers talk about just everything that went wrong during the production of this film. It's astounding. You just can't believe. There's moments of where I was listening to it where you just can't believe this even got made. I mean, everything from just all these conflicts, but then just trying to do all of these ambitious, ambitious, you know, action scenes and locations, and they just had no budget to do it. I mean, but yet they did it anyway. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like literally cutting and pasting, but for a Superman movie. I mean, just from the opening credits, you can just see like how shitty and terrible it's gonna be. But I fucking love this movie. Again, I only have this on DVD. I really, really want to buy this on Blu-ray. It's a must-have. It's an experience. It's not just a movie. It's an experience on complete on really experiencing something that is complete and utter trash. But again, says something I guess about me, but again, it just works because it goes there. It goes to those depths. It doesn't tease you. It doesn't have, it's not just a case of like, well, the writing's not great or, some of these Nuclear Man's character isn't fleshed out. No, it's just bad. And I just love this movie. I love it. And as much as I love the first two, I mean, of course, the first two Superman movies are iconic classics, kind of untouchable. I have to say, at the end of the day, Superman for the Quest for Peace is my favorite of the franchise. I need and will get this on Blu-ray come hell or high water. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.